For this project, I was really interested in thinking about the legacy of education in my hometown and building out a digital archive of my city and collaborating with community members and talking with family, trying to organize and think about what it means to narrate this past, given the amount of community change that's happened over the past few decades. But I also think about archives in a more meta way in terms of like it provides opportunities for people in the future or even people in the present moment to actually understand the sort of logics that people use to tell stories or the logics that people use to identify what should be included. So it does give us some insight in particular around people's values around history and around narrative and around just like inclusion of certain histories. So for me, when I approach work and my interest in the archival is an interest in sort of storytelling and the political aspect of storytelling, and also just providing an opportunity for people to like reflect and see themselves again. My interest in this particular Weed Women project, the origin of it was sort of thinking about what does it mean to create an archive around a small city, a city that's not like New York or Los Angeles, where a lot of attention is paid, but sort of thinking about these smaller cities, which do have a national and I would say international importance in our understanding of sort of the things that were happening in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And in the process of thinking about this work, not thinking about myself as the originator of building an archive, because there's a whole lineage of archives that have been built in the city prior to what I'm working on, but thinking about myself as part of that lineage and thinking about how I work with myself more intentionally and work with others more intentionally to build out one iteration of an archive that people can visit, in addition to the other archives and collections that exist in people's homes and their garages across different institutions as well. I'm going back because it's my hometown. I grew up there, and so much of who I am now was shaped by these early experiences, either making books at the elementary school that I was at, or having exposure to like hard, like real science, like going and collecting water samples and analyzing things before I even turned 13. And so for me, I feel very indebted to my city in terms of being exposed to a lot of things that I don't think I would have otherwise been exposed to, because the adults and the community members in that city were invested in thinking about education and thinking about community programming in a way that was really beneficial to me, and I would argue my peers as well. And I'm definitely coming back in some ways as an outsider, because I haven't been within the city for the last 10 years. And so for me, a lot of this has really been focused on what intentional looks and feels like in terms of like me not leading this in a lot of ways. So I've been in intense conversations with two folks in the community around this work, and it's been really great to like have holes filled in for me around like what's happening, what I'm missing, what the current tensions are, and that's been really helpful. And I know that had I approached this as I'm going to go in and do this, then this work would have been very different because I don't have that insider knowledge. The history of it's been warped in terms of like what people choose to focus on, the crime, the crack epidemic being sort of this like epicenter of a story. And I'm interested in being like, yeah, that is actually part of the story, but I'm also interested in all the other things that were happening simultaneously before and after as well. And thinking about how do we create nuanced stories that are not trying to obscure or remove things that are not like beautiful points, but actually places them in a larger context and allows for simultaneity and allows for things to be true, many things be true at the same time. And if that's the case, then it provides an opportunity for us to think a little bit more about what it might mean for us to consider an archival project that does include those things, because those things are important. It is important for young people to look back and say, during the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, the way the city was thought about was in this lens, as a way for them to understand why other things that they may be interested in are not there, right? So if you just remove it, then it doesn't do us any good. But again, I think it's adding another layer of complexity. And so what I am interested in this particular moment where a lot of folks are trying to like make sense of what school is looking like, or make sense of what institution building is looking like, making sense of like how communities come together. I actually do believe that East Palo Alto has some really amazing stories around like literally folks in the community being like, oh, wow, the schools are terrible that our kids are asked to go to. We'll just make our own. uh, sort of the audacity and the extreme self-determination that comes out of that, I think can be important for other people to experience and make sense of, and part of their sense making. I also think that these stories of like young folks organizing around certain political and environmental issues are really important too, so that we're reminded that this isn't something that happened in the late 2000s, but like folks in East Palo Alto have been organizing, young people have been organizing for decades. As I think about the East Palo Alto project, one of the things that's been really important to me is not jumping in, right? There was at first like this presumed, like I got this because I'm from East Palo Alto, like I know where to look. And I did all this research, and then I started pulling back and like talking to even my parents who are still there, and asking questions, going back to one particular elder in my community and asking questions about what's going on there. At this point, it's been like this slow process of just talking to two people, then talking to my family, and then just sort of like diving back in to sort of like look more closely and continue to read. And so the hope is that when it is safe to travel back, that we will actually have some, I don't like to call them focus groups because that feels a bit clinical, but actually like getting people together in a room to sort of talk about not so much the city's history, but more questions around like what actually an archive means to them. And so in trying to build out an archive for this project, I hope that this project actually encourages folks to take local history a little bit more seriously. There are like tons of historical societies for like larger areas. I think every day about small cities and small areas that probably have really rich history that we don't know about because folks get up and move, or they just don't think it's important because like who cares about, you know, our small town. And so I do hope this project reminds folks that like, yeah, actually save that flyer from that like art exhibit and like make sure that like someone in the neighborhood is like, you know, doing a quick audio interview with that elder who's like 95, who unfortunately will pass soon, who's been around long enough to like see the community change. I think more broadly, I just really hope that while we love our big cities, that we shift some of our attention to small cities, that we pay attention to like the little cities that have like done really great things. I think it's like, how do we champion small towns? We are like maybe 30,000 people, 2.5 square miles, but like a lot of stuff happened here, guys. A lot of really amazing stuff. Like we were doing stuff and we continue to do really amazing work. So I definitely think that that needs to be part of the historical record. And I think that folks who are in small towns need to be reminded that you can be small and mighty. And that we need to acknowledge these things for folks who've been there for a minute and can forget. We need to be reminded. My immediate response is yes, because there should be more women storytellers, right? And then my other response was like, what difference does it make if I'm a woman, if I still carry the same values and beliefs and logics that are like oppressive or just like terrible, right? And so I think for me, it's important that I'm a woman, but I think it's actually even more important that I actually have a set of logics or values around certain things when it comes to archiving. So I think it actually just ends up being a really like lovely mistake or a lovely act, like, you know, a coincidence, you know, that I'm a woman, right?